It is now my privilege and genuinely my pleasure to introduce to you this morning the next speaker. In our field, despite everything you heard from the Chancellor, we use the word translational a bit too often, and it's almost losing its meaning. We use it at plaques of the Institute, at conferences, when we write our grant applications, and so on. But once in a while, you find somebody that actually lives translation, lives it day to day, and somebody who has stood at every point along the path, at the bench, bedside, boardroom, and at every step of the way, he really made things that matter. This is our speaker of today. Dan Skovronsky is the Chief Scientific and Product Officer of Eli Lilly and the President of Lilly Research Laboratories. Recently, his job, I understand, even expanded beyond just being head of R&D of Eli Lilly to include the global commercial opportunities in the company, which means that he is responsible not only on discovery and clinical development approval, but all the way till the patient actually gets his therapies. And that is something very unique. But this is just the title and the end of the story. Let me tell you a little bit about the beginning. Dan is a true physician scientist, trained at Yale in biochemistry, undergrad biochemistry and molecular physics, and moved to University of Pennsylvania for his MD, his PhD, his residency in pathology, his fellowship in neuropathology. And after all of that, he, in 2004, started his first entrepreneurial experience with Avid Pharmaceutical, a company that for the first time imaged beta amyloid plaques in a human brain using the F18 tracer in PET scanning, radio tracer. At that point, in 2010, the company was acquired by Eli Lilly. Dan just moved into Eli Lilly and started the rebuilding Lilly's pipeline from the inside. Over the past decade, he has led what may be the most remarkable scientific transformation any large pharmaceutical company has undergone in our lifetime. He has re-engineered Lilly's drug development process. He has shepherded the development of tirzepatide or Mounjaro. You know, it is Zepbound. Today he has announced something new. Maybe he will talk about it. From clinic to market in record time. He was building the fastest growing franchise of any pharmaceutical in history, and oversaw the approval of Kisunla or donanemab, the first beta amyloid clearing therapy, which is essentially continuation of his work early on at Avid. For those of us in oncology, he has not sat quiet, but his fingerprint is equally there in every step of the way, starting from Loxo integration, all the way building a targeted cancer therapy product, to the latest Kelonia, which is an in vivo CAR T just acquired a few months ago. I could go on and describe all his accolades, including being announced as the Time 100 most influential people in health, and go on and on. But what I wanted to just focus and close is with something else. What strikes me most about Dan, that, and you will feel it immediately as he starts talking, I have no doubt about it, is that he never stopped being a scientist. He looks at the data, he knows the data. In the room, he asks the question that everybody's probably afraid to ask. And that's kind of based on the foundation of the training. So the team in the back, the student, the postdocs, and the younger faculty just take an example of what can be done all the way from a MD, PhD, and so on to the top of the pharmaceutical world. So it's rare to share the podium with somebody who has done so much. It's still rarer to share the podium with somebody that I'm proud to call my friend. So with that, I would like to invite Dan to the podium, and please welcome Dan Skovronsky.
Thank you, Ari, for that absolutely amazingly generous introduction. I was hoping you would never end, but I'm afraid it'll be an anticlimax after that. Great to be in this room full of students and researchers and academic leaders, investors, biotech entrepreneurs. It's a community and ecosystem I care deeply about and have been part of for a long time. As you heard, 16 years ago, executives at a pharmaceutical company took a bet on my small biotech company and took a bet on me. And I'm still there. I'll tell you a little bit of the story of some of the things we're working on and we've accomplished at Lilly, but maybe start off by saying that decision I took 16 years ago and have renewed continuously since then to become part of that company has got to be the best decision of my life. Except I see my wife here in the audience who's reminding me that that was the second best decision I've ever made. And it's obvious what the first best, most important decision in all of our lives is. I've titled the talk "The Oldest New Company in Pharma," and I'll explain why I've called it that. Here's my disclosure, a lot of words there. Obviously, I work at a pharmaceutical company. If you're a doctor and want to prescribe our medicines, you can, but don't do it because anything you hear today. This is not for prescribing information. If you like to invest in stocks and you want to buy Lilly stocks, you can. I do that. But don't do it because of anything I say today. This is not an investment meeting either. Our company, just last week, we celebrated 150th anniversary of our founding. There's no other company in America or in the world that is our size and our age. It is unique to be a 150-year-old company of our size. We've had a lot of scientific advances, and probably for most of our history, we're most famous for bringing insulin to the world. This is a picture of a young boy with the initials JL. On the left, in late 1922, he was on a starvation diet. That was the state-of-the-art treatment of the time for type 1 diabetes. And he, at that point, had months to live. His mom knew that, and his doctors knew that. And then because of work Lilly did of translating the discovery of insulin into a process to manufacture this at scale, we did that in about a year, and then were able to release millions of doses, including one of the first doses who went to this boy, saved his life. There he is just a couple months later, and he went on to live a long and a productive and happy life because of this invention that Lilly was able to bring to the world. A lot of our early history has similar kinds of stories. This is Lilly manufacturing, producing the Salk polio vaccine. Lilly was the #1 producer of this polio vaccine when sort of 30 years after diabetes stopped being a death sentence, parents were terrified that their kids would wake up in the morning and be paralyzed from polio. We were able to collaborate with Dr. Salk to produce this incredible advance. Lilly scientists looked everywhere to extract medicine. We sent scientists to Madagascar, and kind of the modern age of chemotherapy was hugely advanced by our discovery that we could extract chemotherapeutics from the plant of the Madagascar periwinkle, and vincristine, vinblastine, still used in some settings today, were invented by our scientists. At the same time, Lilly was an early adopter of medicinal chemistry to make custom bespoke medicines. We got our start there from antibiotics. Lilly was the #1 producer of penicillin during World War II and saved many, many lives. And then went on to invent a whole generation of antibiotics, including nearly all of the cephalosporins, drugs still used today. And as we sort of finished our work in antibiotics, we moved to psychiatry and made a whole generation of drugs for treating depression and schizophrenia, changing not just how those patients were treated, but how we thought about psychiatric illness in the world. Of course, natural products and chemistry are kind of older technologies. Biotechnology, or reprogramming cells to make drugs, many people may not know, the first biotechnology product ever in the world was created by Lilly in collaboration with a small biotech company at the time, Genentech. And we created biotechnology recombinant insulin. That was the first biotech drug. And then everything we call biotech today followed from those initial foundational steps that we took in the 1980s. 150 years of history, I just sort of encapsulated for you there. And 150 years later, we are the largest pharmaceutical company, actually the largest healthcare company in the world ever, and the fastest growing company in our industry by quite a large margin. So that's a triple combination you just don't see: large, old, and fast. I think what I want to accomplish in this talk today is kind of tell you what I think is the secret to our recent success. Here's a chart of revenues by company, or you can make any chart of financial metrics, and it probably puts Lilly on top by a reasonable margin these days. Of course, it's easy to point at our progress with incretins, Zepbound, or tirzepatide, and others, and say that's the reason why. Actually, if you took out incretins and said these have never been invented, and then you ask the question again, what's the fastest growing pharmaceutical company in the world? It's, again, still Eli Lilly and Company. And the reason is our productive investment in R&D in all of our areas: oncology, immunology, cardiovascular disease, and of course, neuroscience, which I'm very passionate about. Like every pharmaceutical company probably in the industry, we say that discovery is in our DNA, that we're based on research and development. Our company was run by the Eli Lilly family for a couple generations, and it says on our wall a quote from one of our founders that research is the heart and soul of this enterprise. And historically, Lilly has been one of the largest investors of R&D in our industry. Of course, we also say what many other companies say: we're patient-focused. We only care about the patients. I believe it's true, and in our case, maybe it's true in other companies as well. Those are necessary elements for success in this business. Invest in research and development. That's how drugs are created. And do it because you care about the science and the patients that you can help. That's probably not enough to find success in this, what I think is the most challenging endeavor known to humankind, turning science into medicines. It takes more. This just shows us most of our work actually is outside of incretins, which we're, of course, now famous for. So as I prepare for this talk, I tried to think of what are the messages I want to leave you with. What are the key elements that I believe have been critical to our recent success? And they're shown here. Speed, not because this is a competitive business and you want to be first to market. Speed because patients are waiting. And speed, probably most importantly, because this is a hard thing to do, to create medicines. There will be many failures along the way. And the faster you can get to those failures and learn from them, the faster you can find success. So we want to have faster learning cycles. That goes hand in hand with persistence. If you give up the first time you stumble, you won't have the opportunity to learn and find success. Most things, certainly in this business, that are worth doing, most problems worth solving, are really hard to solve. And you probably won't find success the first time. Many companies in our business give up on failure, and that's not a recipe for success. Third is investment in platform technologies. I'll talk more about that in detail. But the idea here is, as a 150-year-old company, we can think in decades. We can invest in foundational technologies that may not yield a drug today or next year or the year after that, but that we believe, like biotechnology, over the decades to come will pay off with advances to human health. That's a core strategy we have. And then finally, what I'm part of here today is we believe that we can only be successful if we're part of a successful ecosystem that includes academia, investors, biotechnology companies, and even, believe it or not, governments as part of that ecosystem of healthcare. So I'll just spend a few minutes on each of these topics. When I came to Lilly, we were actually the slowest, dead last in our industry in speed of drug development. There were a lot of reasonable reasons for that at the time. I probably made the mistake of speaking up about that as a young new executive in the company, saying, is it our strategy to be last? And the reward for that was I got the job of being tasked with speed us up. And so we kind of blew up and re-engineered every element of how we do drug discovery and drug development. And over the last decade, we've gone from last to first. And actually, we cut our development time from idea to drug approval, or from first human dose to drug approval, in half. And every year we get a survey from our industry that looks at clinicaltrials.gov and ranks all of our competitors. And for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been number one by a fair margin, 3.5 years faster than others. Again, because we care about learning from clinical data and then going back to the lab, reinventing the molecules and making them better. That speed, I think, paid off in the most tangible way a couple years ago when we mobilized to fight the pandemic of COVID-19. February, late January, early February of 2020, I met up with a biotechnology company, Upsellera, and together we decided to make antibodies against COVID-19. We got started in February. A couple months later, by May, we had discovered an antibody, created it under GMP conditions, and were authorized to begin testing it in humans. This is a picture from that day. I'll never forget it. We sent out our antibodies on jets around the country to the phase 1 clinical trial sites. That day, at the end of May in 2020, was humanity's first attempt to fight against this new virus with a drug that we had created. It was actually successful, and over the coming months, we learned that we could save lives with this drug. We actually made 3 other drugs to fight COVID-19 as well. This became the first therapy FDA approved in less than a year. And this was because of all of our investments in speed that we could go so quickly. And surely millions of doses of this and the subsequent antibodies we created were used and saved tens of thousands of lives in the US and around the world. So that's one concept, speed. The second is persistence. And if you're going to persist on something, choose wisely what you're going to work on, because you might be working on it for decades. This is a cartoon. I think this is how a lot of companies must do their choosing. I've had a lot of consultants come by and tell me what we should work on, and usually it's some variation of this. They say, well, what's the fastest growing market in our industry today? Probably they would say today it's obesity, but in the past they would have said immuno-oncology or whatever's working. And look for things that are both large and fast growing, and then you should work there. That seems logical, I guess. Of course, it's a logical way for every company in the industry to work on exactly the same thing. and to work on it probably 10 years too late to actually matter for patients, because if it's large and growing market, there's probably already a solution that works pretty well. We've taken an opposite approach at Lilly. We don't think about market size or net present value or growth rates when we start or commit to therapeutic problems. We think about unmet medical need, are people suffering, and is the science ripe to make a difference for those patients? And if those two things intersect in our minds, then we embark on working on that problem, and we commit to work on it until we find a solution. Jumping in and out and moving to whatever's hot is not our strategy or our history. That's probably best exemplified by our progress in Alzheimer's disease. I've been working on Alzheimer's disease for 25 years. My company's been working on it a little bit longer. And most of that 30 years that Lilly's been working on Alzheimer's disease has been marked by failure. 25 years of failure followed by a couple years of success is still a great outcome for Lilly and for the patients we serve. But that's what it takes to beat a hard disease like Alzheimer's. Along the way, as our industry experienced failure after failure, and every single other company that was along with us on that journey from the beginning quit, others came in, of course, but nearly everybody quit, we decided to first create the tools that we needed to diagnose the disease so that we could then create the treatments to beat Alzheimer's disease. And my company, we created the world's first amyloid plaque imaging agent. That was necessary to advance the therapies, but not sufficient. So we created the world's first tau imaging agent. That was also a Lilly invention. And then we created what is surely the most important blood test for Alzheimer's disease today, a p-tau217. That's another Lilly invention. It took a lot of scientists, a lot of work, a lot of investment just to create the tools to let us do the clinical trials, to let us develop a therapeutic. That's the kind of investments you can make if you have a multi-decade persistent a commitment to a disease space. And then that culminated a couple of years ago in success with a drug called donanemab. The phase 2 trial readout, I'll never forget this day either, was literally the first time ever a randomized controlled trial in Alzheimer's disease for a disease-modifying drug showed success. We had a history of 100% failures until that day, and we showed 32% slowing of disease progression. And we said, that's not enough, we're going to repeat it. And still today, and we repeated it and got almost exactly the same result in a larger phase 3 trial. And still today, that stands as the only time in Alzheimer's disease that a result like this has been replicated in 2 trials, replication being a key element of a scientific certainty. And we're really proud of what we did here to fight Alzheimer's. We recently showed that the benefits actually grow over time. The initial trials were 18 months, and then, of course, we followed those patients, and they continued to spread. We also learned the earlier you treat Alzheimer's disease, the stronger effect you can have. Just think about that for a second. The earlier you treat, the bigger the benefit. Hugely meaningful for me personally. Here's a picture of my grandmother with our daughter there as a baby. She got to meet her great granddaughter. My grandma had an amazing life. She could take on any challenge. She was a survivor of Auschwitz. The one thing she couldn't beat was Alzheimer's disease. And until our work, there was really no treatments. We were, unfortunately, too late for my grandmother, but just in time for the next generation, for my parents' generation, and for me and all of you and our kids. I think we have even more to offer. We're working on prevention. So we're extending those tools. And we are now running 2 large clinical trials where we literally just take people who are cognitively normal, who have no memory or thinking complaints, We test them, and if they're positive on this blood test we invented, we know they're having the early changes of Alzheimer's in their brain without any symptoms. We treat them and follow them and see if we can prevent them from ever showing the symptoms of Alzheimer's. I think it's going to work. There's a lot of energy behind this. Actually, in the most recent trial, you might think, is it hard to find people to volunteer? They don't have any complaints. We found 60,000 people in 8 months to volunteer for this kind of study. This is the most feared disease of elderly individuals, and the idea that we could stop it before it starts, I think, is a compelling vision that we're committed to making a reality. What about GLP-1s? Another story of persistence. A lot of time people ask me about Lilly's overnight success. It's been 100 years in the making, at least, dating back to our origins in insulin. Of course, incretins are insulin-secreting hormones. That's how they got their name. And the first incretins were discovered in the 1970s and 1980s. And then in the early 2000s, Lilly, again in partnership with a small biotech company, Amylin in this case, created the world's first incretin therapy, exenatide. It was an amazing drug, a huge breakthrough. It had to be injected twice a day and was sort of limited in the number of people it could help as a consequence. But we didn't stop there. And you can see about a decade later, we came out with a better drug that was once a week. And that actually, as the first weekly incretin, it had a huge breakthrough because now a lot of people wanted to try it. A once a week injection is quite different than a twice a day injection. And then a couple years ago, probably the drug that made us most famous, tirzepatide, we launched as the world's first dual-acting, bringing both human incretins in a single molecule to patients. And then just last month, we launched the world's first ever small molecule GLP-1, sort of a feat of molecular engineering to make a small molecule that can work like a peptide, but you can manufacture and take like any other medicine without food or water restrictions. We think there's about 1 billion people on this planet with diabetes or obesity. And that's a scale of medical need that just can't be addressed with injectable drugs or even synthetic peptides. We need real small molecules that can be mass-produced and shipped around the world and delivered with ease for patients. That's why we created this drug, and it's off to an amazing start. Of course, as it often happens in science, when you're working on really interesting new biology, one discovery leads to another, and you find new uses for what you started. And it turns out that metabolism, as probably most of you know already, is intimately linked with so many other systems in our body, including inflammation, including cognition. And we've started testing incretins across a number of diseases. A couple years ago, I sort of came to this realization, and I kicked off a project that I called Incretins for Everything. And we started doing these clinical trials. It's not going to work for everything. That wasn't a medical claim. But we're eager to explore what will incretins work for. And so far on the right, it works for heart failure, sleep apnea, psoriasis. Who would think that a drug for diabetes and weight loss would improve psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis? It did. Pain, osteoarthritis pain, and then many more things are coming in clinical trials. Finally, I come to platforms. I showed you our early history. We started on insulin because one of the reasons that Lilly was the optimal producer of human insulin was because our headquarters in Indianapolis was a short train ride from the stockyards of Chicago, which was where most livestock was slaughtered. And we would then quickly bring the organs to the pancreas to Indianapolis and extract it for insulin. Synthetic chemistry I talked about and biotechnology. In the last 10 years or so, I moved our company into genetic medicines, making medicines not out of atoms or amino acids, but out of DNA and RNA, and that I think is now about 1/3 of our portfolio. And then cellular reprogramming is probably the newest area, kind of a combination of genetic medicines, but also small molecules and large molecules biotechnology to turn your own cells into disease-fighting machines in your body. Such a promising area. So I just sort of end with this picture of George Clues. He was the first chief scientist at Lilly. I'm the 10th. He's the one 100 years ago who brought insulin to the world. And his story reminds us the importance of the ecosystem. Right? Lilly didn't discover insulin or the polio vaccine or penicillin, but we were the ones who recognized the importance of these things and brought them to the world. And that continues to today. The majority of our launches have benefited from this external environment and business development transactions. Still, we do most of the development, I think 70% of our drugs. We did all the development at Lilly. We like to bring innovation in as early as possible, often during the discovery stage or phase one, where we can add the most value. We interact across this ecosystem in lots of interesting ways. We invest in biotech companies. Probably one of the largest investors, actually, in biotech in the world is Eli Lilly and Company. We incubate companies with space. We provide services. We make antibodies or RNA therapeutics or test them in humans on behalf of biotech companies. We're not a CRO, but we do this because it's easy for us, and we have the capacity, and we can do it fast and high quality for biotech companies. We provide AI services. We've trained models on literally $1 billion worth of data in our walls, and then we make those models available to biotech companies actually for free to just improve the ecosystem that we're part of, with the belief that if invention of drugs gets easier and better, that will benefit all of us, including the largest company in this space, of course. And we collaborate with academia and industry groups in all of the usual ways. We've done 7 acquisitions in the first 5 months of this year. We're busy in this space trying to find the best ideas and bring them inside of our walls. Often the people that come with these are just as important as the technologies. It's sometimes harder to retain and develop than the technologies, but I think we have a strong track record there as well. What's next for Lilly? Here's some ideas that I'm excited about. These aren't the most popular ideas in our industry, actually. Pain relief without reliance on opioids. I don't think there's any other large pharmaceutical companies working on pain medicines, yet I guarantee every single person in this room has experienced pain, and chronic pain is one of the most common causes of human suffering in the world. And why is no one working on it? We're working on chronic pain. Hereditary deafness, we created the first gene therapy to restore hearing in a child who was born deaf. We want to expand that to restore hearing in millions of people. Age-related hearing loss is also a tractable problem. I don't believe any other company is working on that. In vivo cell reprogramming, I mentioned already. And finally, one-and-done gene editing. I know it's a crazy idea, but it's just a crazy idea that we like. Why do patients have to take a drug every day or once a week or once a month? Why can't we correct their diseases with a single therapy that a doctor administers? We're embarked on a quest to do that, starting with hypercholesterolemia. And I think that's working, and I'm super excited about that. So I end by coming back to the picture of this boy 100 years later. I have the privilege of walking by the statue that you see on the right every morning on my way to my office. It sits in our lobby to remind us of the impact that we can have on people's lives, but also to remind us that our job is not done. Most of the diseases I've talked to you about today are not cured. We've made tremendous progress, but patients need more. Actually, really proud to highlight that we're working on a glucose sensing insulin. 100 years later, the same disease, diabetes, the same kind of patient at the center of it, but a wholly new technology that no one could have imagined. Coming from Alborz and colleagues in Pasadena at a small biotech company we acquired called Protomer. Something unimaginable 100 years ago that will make a reality for for people who still need us. So a privilege to be here in this room, a privilege to be part of this industry and turning science into medicines for patients. Thank you so much.